Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to start this Bava Metzia daf Sadi Tes. We're going to begin on Sadi Ches Amud Beis by the new Mishnah. Says the Masnisin. Hashayel is a par. So as we've been learning this parak, we're talking about the cases of the Arba Shomrim, specifically now about a borrower of a cow, and it's not in front of you, and therefore the owner sent this cow from the owner's rishus to the borrower's. The question is, what is the status while it's in transit? Which in business terms is FOB. Is it the destination, or is it at the time it's already delivered? Who is responsible? So let's say the owner sends it biad beno, biad avdo, from the hand of his servants. Biad shlucho, the owner sends a shliach to present this cow. O biad beno, biad avdo, biad shluchoi, shel shoyel. Let's say the borrower is the one that gets a shliach to go to this owner's house to take the cow. Umesa, and let's say this animal dies in the middle, potter. In this situation, the din is potter. Says Rashi. What is the reason? It must be because until it's actually in the shoyel's rishus, then the din is that he's not acquiring this object. Which is even talking about a case where he appointed a shliach. So, before we actually see Rashi, let's see the Seifa. Omel hashoyel, but if the shoyel specifically said, Shilcha li biad b'ni biad avdi biad shluichi, I want you to give it to my shliach. So the shoyel actually wants this to take place. He makes this declaration, O biad bincha biad avdecha biad shulchacha, O she'oimer lo hamashil, or the one who owns this cow says, Hareini mishalchalocha biad b'ni biad avdi biad shluchi, I'm going to send it, if that's okay. O biad bincha biad avdecha biad shulchacha, either my eved, your eved. Now the shoyel says, I agree to this, no problem. I'm willing to accept this deal that you will appoint a shliach. And therefore, v'sholcha v'meisa umeisa chayiv. At that point, the din is you're chayiv. At that moment that the animal was already out of the mashal's rishus, even though it's not actually in the shoyel's rishus, but since the shliach agreed to this whole thing, so therefore now the shoyel will be chayiv right away. Now let's look at this Rashi. This question 4 already asks straight out of the gate. Rashi, Hashel sapor v'sholcha b'biad shlucho, etc. Beis shliach mayri. It says that there's a shliach appointed. So in the ratio, it doesn't really matter. You're still going to be potter. So how do we understand this according to Rabbi or Rav Chisda based on the Gemara in Bava Kama? Interesting that Rashi brings this down. So let's look in Rashi. So it says, Imeisa b'derech, pligabo Rabbi Rav Chisda b'goizel Kama. So toward the end of the Masechta Bava Kama, it discusses a machlokas. Rav Chisda mataretz la l'haydish shoyel the masnisin b'schiru l'kitay. The shoyel of our Mishnah, we're talking about a situation where he actually lives in his house. That's what it means. Shadar bebeisai. That this shliach lives in this man's house. Shadar bebeisai. Aval ein edim shehu shluchai. But there's no actually witnesses that this person was his shliach. De'ika edim, because if in fact there was witnesses, havish shliach, so then he would be the messenger of the shoyel. V'chayiv ha-shoyel bo'einsin, mishimasuloi, which again is hard to understand. What do you mean if the shoyel appoints a shliach? So he didn't appoint him with Adam. It just happens to be that this guy lives in the same house as the shoyel, and he did this as a shliach, but there was no witnesses, because if there was a shliach that this person was actually appointed as a shliach, that would be it. It's considered ki'il, like shliach shal kamaisai, as though the shoyel actually had in his own hands. Rabbi Omer says Rashi, if you'll also shliach be'edim, lav shliachu, which is a tremendous chiddush. that even in the event that you have Eidim that says this guy is my shliach, nonetheless he's still not going to be chayiv with anything that happens on the road with an oinus. The hachi kaimer lay inish mehimnahu iboyas l'shturi biyadi shadar. All he's saying is, this guy is a trustworthy person. If you want, you could give it to him. If not, bring it yourself. Therefore, he's basically saying, I'm not accepting responsibility over here while it's on the road. So that is the answer for question 4, which again is very interesting that Rashi says this, which is usually sticks really to Pashut Pshat, but it is Pashut Pshat. It's hard to understand. How could our Mishnah just Pashut say that you have a shliach and it doesn't do anything? Okay, so that's the Pshat. Let's see the last 3 words of our Mishnah. V'chein b'shashach shemachzira. So too, when the shoyel returns the object, the din is the same. So look at Rashi. Im shol chashol biad b'noi v'avdo. Let's say the shoyel, after having used this object, returns it, not himself, but he has someone else. Or shlucho biad avdo, shlucho shel mashal. Lo yotz rishus shel shoyel. It doesn't leave the shoyel's rishus at shetavel yad hamashal. So basically, according to our Mishnah, when it's given to the shoyel, that's when he accepts responsibility, not before. However, until he physically gives it back to the mashal, so the shoyel is still going to be chayiv. And therefore Rashi says, V'meisa b'derech chayiv. Therefore the shoyel taka will be chayiv if it dies on the road. Okay. Unless, of course, it was stipulated, which is the rest of what Rashi says. Okay, let's continue now to Sadi Tes Amud Aleph. Now, one of the things that it says is that it was given over Biyad Avdoi Chayiv. The question is, Yad Evet Kiyad Rabbi. Fact, Rashi, Bitmia. Katani, we learned our Mishnah, Armel HaShoyel, the borrower says, Shalchali Biyad Avdecha, that I want you to send it to me through your Eved's hands, V'shalchaloi, and it's sent. Chayiv HaShoyel B'oinseha B'derech. So he's going to be chayiv in oinsim. Understand, if the mashil's shliach, or mashil's eved rather, is the one that's giving it over, so it's k'ilu like it's still in the hands of the mashil. So how do we understand this pshat? Because after all, diad eved kiad rabbi damo. Varhu k'ilu holicha lohihu. It's k'ilu like the mashil himself is bringing it to him. So then why would we say that even with the stipulation in the Sefer Mishnah that he would be chai b'oinsin? Why? So Amar Shmuel, it does say Eved, but it's Eved Ivri doli kanili gufe. We're talking about an Eved Ivri. And therefore, when it comes to Eved Ivri, we don't say Yad Eved ki Yad Rabbi. And therefore, even though he gave it over to his Eved, since it was Eved Ivri, and the Shoyel agreed to this whole thing, so therefore the Shoyel will be chayav. That's answer number 1. Rabbi Mafil Tema Beva Kanaini. So Nasa Kaimule Hakisha Bamaka Vihitavoi. It's Ki'ilu, like he actually said to him, hit with a stick and let it come, says Rashi. Hilkach Mish Yotza Michatsera Shobailim. Once it leaves the Chatzer, Ben Boy Shomer Ben Alide Shomer Umdam Rishos Shoyel Deshavdi Nashi Mishates Rishosai. It's already considered like it's left as a shus. It's like he's like hitting it with a stick, so to speak. This is also question 5. Why is the shol chayev? So either again we're talking about Ebed Ivri, or Yermer said Hakisha b'makav v'hitavoy. Okay, so we already have 2 questions done. So Meisvei. Now the Gemara asks a question over here. Hashoyel parim, let's say you borrow a cow. V'shilcham loy biyad b'noi biyad shluchay. Chayiv. So he said that you are chayiv. Even though it was sent, you're chayiv. The shoyel is chayiv. Biyad avdoi, potter. But if it was sent in the hands of the Eved, then the borrower is potter. Now Bishlam l'shmuel, how do we understand? One case it says the Eved, it was given over to the Eved, you're chayiv. One case you're given over to the Eved, you're potter. Now Bishlam l'shmuel, mastis be'Eved Ivri, and braces be'Eved Kanaini. when our Mishnah is talking about an Eved Ivri, which is why your shoyl is chayiv. However, the Brisa, why you put this? Because it's given Eved Ivri, Eved Kenaini, and therefore it's considered like the mashal still is holding on to it because of the original question. Because we say Yad Eved Kiad Rabo by an Eved Kenaini. So that's how we could effort this stira between whether or not the shoyl is chayiv or potter when it comes to this case. El Rav Kasha. How do you understand Rav that he says it's a nasik ka'omer? So Amalach Rav lo tema nasik ka'omer le. Don't say it like that. It's ki'ilu like he said it. El ema ba'omer le hakisha b'makav hitavoy. That Hitaka did say it. He actually did say this. And therefore, that's the reason why, if he actually did say it, that is the reason why the shoyl is going to be chayiv. Ditmar. Hashileni paroscha. Lend me your cow. V'yarmalei biad me. So he said, who should basically give it over to you? How should it be done? Ask the mashal. V'yarmalei kakisha b'makav b'tavoy. Hit it with a stick, let it come. So because the shoyl said that language, so therefore it's ki'ilu like now the shoyl is chayiv right away. But if he didn't say it, so then he would be potter. Amarav Nachman Amarav Baravu Amarav Kivan Shiyatzim Rishus Mashil Umeisa Chayiv. As soon as it leaves from the rishus of the mashil, if that animal dies on the road, then the shoyl is going to be chayiv. It doesn't matter who he sends it with, as the shoyl is directing to hit. Name a Masayale, let's say this is a proof. Hashileni paras chaviyarmela biadmi v'yarmele hakisha b'maka v'hitavai kivan shiyasam rishus mashal mesachayev. It's hard to say it's not like that. It's literally almost verbatim. So Ravashi, no, maybe it's not a proof. Hacha b'ma'askinan. Here, what are we talking about? That in the case you're chayev, kigan shahisa chatzer shel shoyel lifnim v'chatzer shel mashal. Let's say the chatzer, the room of the shoyel, of the borrower, is inside the room of the mashal. So the lender can basically, in order for the borrower to get out of his house, his courtyard, he has to go through the lender's courtyard. However, the lender, because he's on the outside, he would physically be bringing it into a deeper, if you almost envision like the Kodesh HaKadoshim, into an inner chamber. So therefore, when the lender is bringing it to the borrower, obviously it's got to be going there because there's nowhere else to go because it's all closed. It's like a dead-end street. And therefore, because of that, that is the reason why your chayav may be in that situation. Says Rashi, Shechatzer shel mashal patucha l'rishus harabim. It's open. The lender's is open on the fourth side. However, v'chatzar shoyel ifnim mimenu. The shoyels, the borrowers, is inside. There's no way for the borrower to be able to get out except to go through the mashal's chatzar. Skipping 2 lines, the hasam samcha daita the shoyel obviously knows that when the baal is standing in front of him, to basically, and he's facing the animal, let's say is facing the shoyel's property, and it hits it, it's going to run there because there's nowhere else to go. It's closed on all of the sides. So therefore, in that situation, maybe the shoyel is mishabed nafshe. However, it says Rashi, let's just roam around the street. Even if he said this, then maybe he again would need to watch it. He's not going to be mishabed himself until it actually comes into the shoyel's hands. Okay. So if that's the case, mahal memra. So what's the chiddush? Obviously, there's nowhere else for this animal to go. So obviously, the shoyel should be chayav. L'tzricha dika gazyasa, because there are corners. Rashi says chatzer hamashul zavyos. So ma'ad tema lo samcha daita. Maybe the shoyel is still not samech das because dilma kaima hasa. Maybe it'll stay in the lender's chatzer. V'asya azal hedge. It's not going to actually come directly onto the. Directly to my rishus, Kamash Mulan de Samcha Daite. He is Samech Das. Okay. Rav Huna, Hashoyel Kardim Mechaveiroi, if a person borrows a hatchet, an axe, from his friend, so what's the din? So Bika boy, as soon as he starts chopping with it, so then kainai, he is kainet, which says Rashi, Ad shiyichu yimei shiyusai, for the days of the borrowing to commence. Lo baka boy lo kanu. However, if he doesn't chop with it yet, no, says Rashi, the summer in mashicha kaina b'shaimim. The fact that he grabbed this hatchet, which is mashicha, doesn't do anything, because according to the shita, the din of mashicha b'shaimim doesn't apply. So he actually, in order to be able to have some now new kinyan over this object, so it's only when you actually use it. So is this referring to now the shayl is only chay ba'oinsin when he starts using it? So I thought we said, even while, maybe even on the road, our Mishnah says you can see it's still chay, the shayl is still chayiv. Or at the very least, once it's given over to the shayl, and even if the animal never mentions our Mishnah that you're not chayiv until you use the animal, so then certainly when it comes to oinsin, it's even once it's already in your shus. El chazara. The question is, the mashal wants it back. Now, he wants it back. He lent it, but he said, you know what, I changed my mind, I want it back. So bika boy loy matzi hadu be mashal. Once you start using it, that's it. Then you can't just grab it back. Well, bika boy, but if you never used it yet, matza mashal hadu be. Then he could get his hatchet back. Let's say you lend out a kardom and it actually belongs to hektish, which means this shoyl really shouldn't be using it. So the din is moil. Says Rashi, hamashil l'shalem l'hektish karim shenehena b'shalato. So mahi hanas. Rashi says lefi tavas hanashabo. So there is hana for the mashil when he lends something out, which means maybe someone's going to be more likely to lend me things. So anyway, the point is, the mashil who gives a hatchet to lend to someone else, but it's hektish, so the mashil is chayav. Why? And how much? Lefi tavas hanashabai. Again, it's tavas hana. He's not getting paid because the person's borrowing it, but there's tavas hana connected to it. V'chavero mutul l'bakeyaboy. But since it became chulin, so now the one who actually borrowed it can actually use it now, because once it's a din me'ila means that hektish is, the kedusha is taken off of it. Now the loy kanu my moil. I don't understand. If it was not kainet, then why would this person have been moil? It says Rashi, if he was not kainet with mashicha, my moil hamashal. Why is the mashal chayiv me'ila? So then the Gemara continues and says, and how do we say that the person could actually chop with it? He should return it. Just return it and there won't be any me'ila. Right? So according to this opinion, which is again is a machlokas, he holds that when you moil, once it's given over immediately. But as we're saying before, I thought the kinyan is only once it's being used. So if it hasn't been used yet, don't let him use it. Just let him return it, and there won't be any me'il at all. So obviously it's a machlokas. Repliged Rabbi Lezer. Dear Rabbi Lezer, kader shetiknu mashicha b'kuchais, kak tiknu mashicha b'shaymin. Tanya mihachi, kashem shetiknu mashicha b'kuchais, kak tiknu mashicha b'shaymin. So that's what we said. That perhaps this is the whole machlokas, whether or not a shayl, is going to be kind of a mashicha, or is it only at the time of usage? Weiter, ukashem, as we continue to study Testament Bays, shekar k'niknas b'kasev v'shtar v'chazaka, just like when it comes to land. We know, Gemara in Kedushin says that you can acquire it with money, shtar or chazaka. Kach schirus nikna b'kesev shtar v'chazaka. So too rentals. So where it says 1 second, schirus ma'vidite. So what is that referring to? Rashi says, which we're thinking like renting an animal and a kli. So says Rashi, "Umay chazaka." What chazaka are we talking about with metaltalin? So Rav Chisda schirus karka. Now we're talking about renting of land. The same applies. You can acquire land for ownership or for rental of land. In the same way, kesef shana chazaka. Okay. All right, let's stop for a second. Let's look at question 6. Hamashal kardim shel hektish ubaka boy hashoyel mi moyel umasdadim zeh. So obviously it's a machlokas. L'mandi emer the hashoyel kaina b'mashicha. So then hamashal moyel. Once he did mashicha, the mashal is moyel, and then after for tovasana, and then taka afterwards the shoyel can actually use it. However, you hold that the shoyel is not kainit only once he chops with it. Then the shoyel, once he chops with it, he'll be chayiv. Okay. Okay, let's look at question TB26. Hashel kadam chaver masay kainu le'inyan oinsin, umatai le'inyan chazara. Okay, so this is actually not a question totally that we just had. This is TB26. That's somewhat of a fresh kasha. So certainly when it comes to oinsin, it says you're going to be chayiv right away. Let's see what I wrote. Ein shum safek le'inyan. What did I write? Oh, le'inyan oinsin kain miyad. Umalamdin mishleach memishnah. We learned from a mishnah. You're kain right away. V'hu chayiv. Im bakaboy, if you chop with it, az hamashil lo yochel lachser. Fine, it doesn't mention anything about kaidish. I think that's all we really need to write. If you chop with it, then the mashil lo yochel lachser. I wrote afterwards, avul kaidish l'chein hamashil yochel lachser kardam mashayil. Okay. That I'm putting in parentheses. You don't need that, and it's actually a machlokas. Okay, let's continue with Sadi Tes Amud Base. Okay, so the Gemara now continues with the following story. Haiman de Gozel Chavitza de Tamri Mechaver, a person who stole a bundle of pressed dates from his friend. So you have a thief over here. So the Rashi says Tamarim Hamadubokim Yachad, they're attached together. They're called, that's what's called a chavitza. Okay. And usually how many are there? There's 50. So Agav Hadadi Mizdavdin Benun Nechichada. So in the event, says Rashi, Lokech Yachad, if you buy them all together, in an Ismahem Elamem Tes Prutos, it costs 49 Prutos. Kadesh Yachsar V'yimchor Achas Achas V'yiskar Pruta. So therefore, that's the deal. If you, and let's just finish the rest of this Gemara. Chadachadam is dabin benun. If you buy them individually, they cost $1 each, so it's 50. However, as a deal, if they're all clustered together, so you get one for free. Basically, it's 49. The question is, how much does this Gazlan have to pay? So lehedjit misham chamishim. So if this guy stole it this way, so he has to return Kain Shagaza, whenever he has an obligation to return the Karen. So he stole a cluster which is worth 49. So he has to return 49 because that's exactly what it is. However, Hektish, let's say he stole from Hektish, Misham Chamishim. He actually has to pay the full 50, even though it was as a cluster. And not only has to pay 50, also B'chum Shaihu. As we know, if you ate from Hektish, you're going to be chayav to pay an extra fifth. However, of course, Mashin Kain, but not B'mazik, if he was just Mazik Hektish, there's no din chaimish. Dolo Misham Chumsha, do you remember Ish Ki Yoichel Kaidish Pratlu Mazik? Okay. So, Mazik V'Rabibi Barbaya. So he asks the question, L'hedjit Amay Misham Chamishim Nechichada. Why do we say that if he stole this cluster of dates, this pressed dates together, that he has to pay only 49. Namely, ana chada chada havi mizdamnina lahu. He could have said, I would have stole them separately. Okay, they're all clustered together, but I was going to actually take them apart. And I was going to sell all 50. So you should owe me 50, not 49. So Rabbi Yeshua, shaman beisa ba'isa sada. We evaluate a beisa in this field. What does that mean? Tanan. So look in Rashi. Gam in nizakin d'shein, but Bava Kama it says kiyaver ish sado karim. So when it comes to an animal that consumes food with its teeth, which is a chiv of paying full damages, tanan kid mishlomis masha zika, it says over there in Bava Kama that you have to pay the damages. So shomen beis saw. So we evaluate a certain amount of land, beis asada, kama haisi yafa, kama hi yafa. We look at how much it was worth before and after the action of the animal eating. Ve'ein medaktakin liyashomen ha'achil avada. We don't look at the food itself. Ma haisa shava ha'arugazu shenechelas, what it was in this row before. Elaman nechsar beis saw medaminan. We only compare it to the beis saw completely. We don't look at the individual foods and say, oh, each one of these foods could have been sold more. We look at it like as a whole big cluster, even if it would have been sold separately. And therefore, that's a kula also when it comes to this case, that we are only going to look at it all together, even though it's true, maybe you could have sold it separately. Well, remember the Sever Shmuel din hedjit lav kedin gavo adabi. Obviously, what we're saying is that the dinim of a hedjit and gavo is not the same, because when it comes to a hedjit, he only pays 49, gavo he pays 50. But for Tanan, what we learned, natal evan kairim hektish. If a person takes a stone, some stones, or a beam from hektish, loy moil. So in that case, he has not violated me'ilah, says Rashi. We're talking about the treasure of hektish that took these beams, because it was already in his reshus anyway. When he picks it up, he's not coined it because it's in his reshus anyway. So therefore, he's not considered to have been moil at this time, this gizbar. However, says the Gemara, once he gives it, so hu moil, it will now go out to chulin, and therefore the gizbar will be moil. V'chaver lo moil, his friend will not be moil, because now it goes to chulin. Now, what happens bana b'toch beso? Let's say this gizbar really has some chutzpah, and he builds this beam into his house. Lo moil ad shiada tachta b'shavar pruta. It has to be that only once he actually derives some benefit. And Rashi says, this is also more elsewhere, that it was Kenegan Aruba, Dolishanya, that it was opposite a skylight, so you didn't really have to change the beam. Anyway, the point is, you have to have benefited from a pruta. The Yosef Rav Avo Kamed Rav Yochanan, who's sitting, the Yosef V'Kaimer Yisem Mishmei Shmuel, Zoisameris. So based on what we just learned, that he has to actually be, he'll be moil. So because of that, hadar b'chatzar chavera yishoma daitai. Apparently, we should learn from here that a person who is in someone else's property without their consent, sachar, you have to pay them wages. You have to pay them rent. So let's go to Rashi. It says that when you're living on there and deriving benefit from this beam, so the gizbar is moil. The avagav deloy shanya. Even though he didn't actually change the beam has not lost an ounce or a penny of value. So therefore we should learn from here also, if you're using property of someone else and you're not ruining their property at all, you still have to pay them reward. You have to pay them rather rent. Even if this guy wasn't going to rent it out anyway, so it's mamash zelu chaser. Dar. So he was living there, Shlomadas Hektish. Hektish didn't know that he put the beam in his house. Obviously, this is not a good thing for the gizbor's reputation. The Kaimer, nonetheless, we said, the Mishalam Me'ilul Hektish. He still has to pay. The fact that you say Zoisameris, we feel that you could actually learn out Hedjit from Hektish or vice versa. But if that's the case, so then how come in our case we said that this Gazan only pays 49, but when it comes to Hektish, he has to pay 50? Though if we learn out and like Zois and Maris, then they should be linked. So Rav Yochanan, the Hadabe Shmuel Mehahi, Shmuel actually retracted from this statement, and Rashi says, she does not compare the two. So actually, it's not a good Zois and Maris. Maybe he agrees to this by the case of the beam, that you should compare the two, but he was hadar when it comes to the case of the dates, and he had to pay 50. Lo mehahi hadar bei. No, he certainly retracted from the second statement about the beam of the gizbar. Kid Rabbi, the Rabbi hektish shlomadas kehedit madas dami, because you see over here he says that hektish without das is keilu, like it's the same thing as hedit with das. So what do we see? They're really not they're not the same thing when it comes to hektish. So let's look at Rashi. It says Deloy Mishavi din hedil hektish, because hedit madas dami shehektish munach limoyel chol haba vein moicha biyada barachmana oimer mana masani limoyel barachmana yada, and Hashem knows. Okay, Rabba hani shikuloi de tavru chavisa de chamra lechenvana. So let's say you have these workers, Rashi's noisy masoy, like they lift up stuff, and they broke a wine barrel from a store owner. So they have to pay for the wine barrel. The question is, how much is it worth? Now, b'yom shukah, if it was before, Rashi says really before the day of the marketplace, this guy could sell wine. He hasn't lost out on a market day yet. So if it's b'yom shukah, then mizdavna behei. If, let's say, actually, it's just first of all laying out the case. If you sell wine, it's going to be under Yom Shuk. You can get 5 per barrel. B'shar yoyimei mizdavna ba'arba. However, when it's not a market day, you can only sell it for 4. So market day, it's good business for the guy. So he could really be losing out if he lost out on a market day. So this is what the Gemara says. Ahadrule b'yom shukah. If you return it on the day of the shuk, which means that now, or before, which means now he could sell it anyway, so mahadru le chavisa de chamra, then just give him back a barrel of wine, because after all, you broke a barrel of wine, so give him back a barrel of wine, and now he'll be able to sell it, and that's it. He's not going to have absorbed any loss. Bishar yoimi, but let's say it was already past the market day, so in that situation, and therefore it's too late for him to sell anything. So mahadru le hey. You should give him 5, because that's how much he could have made had this barrel of wine been around in the marketplace. The marketplace time has gone, so you should pay him for that amount that he could have sold it for. That's only if this guy had no other wine to sell. Let's say this store actually did have other wine, and there's no way he was going to sell all of his wine. He was only going to sell, let's say, 1 barrel. So then, so he could have sold that wine barrel. And he would just have to deduct the tircha, and it also says Rashi, barzin yasa, the announcer for the sale. That there was a person that would basically do this. Or maybe you have to hire someone to make a hole in the barrel. So because it was made out of earthenware, it was hard to open. You need like an expert to open it. So so that's deducted. Because he didn't have to pay for those people. So therefore, again, they could buy another barrel now before the market day for 4, and now he could sell it on the market day for 5. So it would be okay for them. But again, if it was after the market time, so then he would have to give them 5, or that's only if there was no other wine. If there was other wine, he could have just said you could have sold us that other wine, and therefore I don't have to give you 5. And not only that, I'm saving you money for having to pay for these other expenses. Ad kan.